For a number of weeks on this show, women's sport is under attack in Britain, and if we're not careful, its very existence could soon be threatened. Hard-left organisations like Stonewall, the woke mob, the politically correct and the Labour Party have decided trans rights trumps the rights of those born biologically female. And as a number of high-profile sports people, both trans women and women, have told me on this show, even years of hormone treatment doesn't reverse male puberty, putting women's sport on a slippery slope to extinction.
This isn't a sort of a cultural thing. This is about just straightforward fairness and biology. And feelings don't do sport. You know, our bodies do sport.
The reason sport is separated by sex is because males have massive physical advantages compared to females. So if women's sport did not exist, female athletes who are household names like myself, Paula Radcliffe, Sharon Davis, we would be nobodies. Nobody would have ever heard of us. So this is why women's sport exists.
We need to honor sport and recognize sex above gender in order to keep fairness in sport, unless we would like to not include women anymore.
We cannot have biological boys competing against women in women's sports. We need a fair playing field. And right now, if we allow this, it's not a fair playing field.
As a major supporter of women's sports, I have been clear on my view that there is no grey area on this. I'm all for an equal society. Trans competitors like Leah Thomas, like Laurel Hubbard and like Emily Bridges should be welcomed into specific trans events or compete against other biological males. But they simply cannot be allowed to compete against women. Sporting bodies must limit competitors to the biological sex in which they were born. And tonight, I can reveal sanity is prevailing after a major intervention from the Secretary of State for Culture, Media and critically on this issue, sport. So Nadine Dorries, in this exclusive interview with GBNews, reveals her plans. Watch. How are you going to protect biological women in sport?
We're speaking to various sporting bodies about this. I am absolutely of the opinion that it is impossible for a trans woman to compete in women's sport. You can choose your gender and we will support you and help you to do that. We will give you all the love and compassion and support you need to get to that place. But you can't change your biology. You can't change that you were born male or you were born female. It is what it is. And I'm afraid even with, those athletes who try to get the testosterone levels below, it still isn't the case that if somebody's been through puberty and they've developed through puberty, that it will make the significant difference. So I just don't believe that any trans... And we've seen it happen recently with cycling. The athletes have stood up. Women athletes have stood up for themselves.
Sanity prevailed there.
Yeah.
But if Stonewall had their way, there would be a very different approach. So would it be possible that there might have to be a law at some point to protect female sport?
I would, I hate making laws. I'd really prefer it if, and I've got enough laws being made in this department. We're passing 5 bills, I think, and there haven't been 5 bills in the last 20 years. I would prefer the sporting bodies to come together, and actually I've asked for a round table with them to discuss this, so that they can come together with a compact and a joint agreement and reach a position which protects women athletes, but also shows compassion to those trans athletes and helps them to achieve the goals that they want to. Maybe that's having, trans categories. I don't know what the answer is, but I do know that the bottom line is you can't have trans women competing in women's sport.
I completely agree. Secretary of State, thank you so much.
Thanks.
So, to respond now to that major piece of news from the Minister, my superstar panel, the political commentator Dominique Samuals, the former Tory London mayoral candidate Shaun Bailey, and the author and broadcaster Amy Nickell. So, Shaun, I'll come to you first. As a Conservative, this will be a very politically popular decision, I imagine, from Nadine Dorries, to stand up for women's sport.
It's also morally the right thing to do. Look, the hardest thing in the world is to keep young teenage girls involved in sport. One of the big things is seeing their champions, their heroes succeed. When you mix trans women into it, you failed that. But I think the real failure here has been on two levels. One is the sporting bodies. They're a bunch of cowards, every single one of them. And the idea that you can take testosterone or remove it from a male, a biological male, and that even up the field is complete rubbish. I am taller than the average woman. I have far more muscle than the average woman. And I gained those things when I was a teenager. It's too late to remove them. And they know this, but yet they have capitulated. And it goes to the other piece as well. Where is all these people who proudly used to walk around with T-shirts saying, I'm a feminist? Where are you now? The woke world has cowered you. You are cowards. And anybody who hasn't felt the need to stand up and support people like Shaun Davies, who's constantly banged on about how women are being robbed of their sport, I would say is a coward. But it boils down to because the trans crowd is very active and very angry, but people must hold on to the truth. You cannot leave women's sport in this condition because it will simply disappear.
This is a massive moral panic which doesn't really exist. The number of trans people is 0.25%. That is precisely why they cannot have their own
But you understand in sport, Amy, you only need one trans person to upset an entire event. In a team sport, you only need one trans member of the team. Honestly, yes, I do. If you like female sport, it only takes one biological man in a team to destroy the whole competition.
Can I ask you a question? Could you replace all the times you use the word trans with gay? You would say gay people cannot be involved in women's sport because that's basically it's not completely different. It's not completely different. And what is more difficult being a woman in sport or being a trans woman in sport? Because a trans woman in sport is currently 80% more likely to commit suicide than a woman.
That has nothing to do with sport.
It's to do with trans rights, and trans women are women.
It's the same as being trans is completely ridiculous.
It's not suggesting it's like it. It's being in a minority of people. It's to do with rights. It's to do with rights.
Is believing you are of a different sex.
Okay, but Amy, can I just ask Amy, what about the rights of the biological women sporting folk? What about their rights?
I think when it's such a tiny, tiny proportion, it is better to just include trans women as women and consider them as women. And you know something that would help with this whole situation is hormone blockers for children, which is something...
Oh, God!
Can I tell you why? So this has been rolled out in Scandinavia years ago. So now these people are adults. It has a massive success
rate. Have you spoken to anyone who has had to detransition, Amy?
Talk about Keira Bell, which is a massive anomaly and has reversed...
Sean, come in here.
I'll tell you should talk about every child in the world who's not old enough to make that decision, who has no idea what they'll feel like in 5, 10, 15
hormone
years.
blockers are completely reversible.
A child should not be put through that process, regardless. It shouldn't even put through the conversation.
A trans child shouldn't be put through puberty. That is far more mentally damaging.
But Amy, the point of this is about sport. It's about sport. It's about a physical reality. And in sport, sex matters.
Inclusion matters more.
No, it does not. No, it does not.
In competitive sport.
No, you can't terrorise everybody.
This whole argument is completely a bogeyman to just attack trans people. If you want it, you've got Nadine Dorries talking about compassion. Have some compassion and think about these tiny minority of people.
Can I just say this? You're completely misunderstanding what the purpose of competition and sport is. Competition's not about inclusivity.
It's about Thomas didn't win most of her races.
It's about A, fairness, and B, the best person winning the race. The fairness is achieved by those with similar levels of strength and ability competing against each other. When you remove that factor from sport, it's no longer fair, and therefore the results are no longer legitimate. So therefore you cannot have biological men who have clear physical advantages competing with women because you basically lose the meaning of sport and why it's important. So therefore you are advocating to destroy female sport. As a woman, I find that
how could a quarter of 1% destroy women?
Because you only need one competitor in a field, and they're going to win. I mean, Emily Bridges, that cyclist Emily Bridges. Here's the example. Emily Bridges is a British example. She was literally competing in male events a few weeks ago. She was going to compete against Olympic class British cyclists, and you know what, Amy? Based on their existing times from this year, she was going to thrash their asses. And That is wrong. That is wrong.
If you all care so much
about a very significant swimmer before they transitioned.
She didn't
to
win
female.
in loads of the female races. Anyway, it's completely irrelevant. If you like women's sport so much, when was the Women's World Cup? What month?
That's
how important you are in women's sport.
Hold on. No, I'm sorry, you're missing a point. Let's make 3 big points. If you allow trans women to compete against women, it's dangerous. Boxing, MMA,
exactly,
rugby.
We've seen it.
It's dangerous.
We've seen women being literally pummeled by biological men.
Do you not see?
And Amy, let me ask you a question. It's very obvious to me. It's very obvious to me because you've just asked a question about women's sport. Well, I've spoken numerous times on the show. I am one of the main supporters of the London Pulse semi-professional female netball team. Literally, that team would be destroyed if there's 7 people on court at one time. If they were playing against a team with just one trans woman in the team, they would have no chance.
You would be much.
They would have no chance. And I am going to judge, based on your comments tonight, that you neither play sport or support women's sport. Do you? It's very obvious to me.
And I support the rights.
No, but just you don't play sport and you don't support a women's team, do you? It's obvious. You don't care about it.
I care about the rights of a minority of people that currently have an 80% suicide rate. That is unacceptable. You're fueling hate if somebody was going to die.
Mental health issues as well.
Mental health issues within trans people are the highest across all
because they have gender dysphoria.
Because of conversations like this.
It's a mental health issue.
You cannot rob people of their futures because
That's
of
exactly
a minority.
What you do.
You cannot terrorise. You can't terrorise the majority to support this very small minority. Your words. That's ridiculous. You've heard stories in America where girls have trained their whole life because they get a 4th scholarship to go to university. People transition. They're now lower down the ranks. Their whole life is destroyed.
And also, by the way, no one is talking about banning trans women from competing in the biological male categories. They can identify as a woman, they can have long hair, they can dress as a woman. Why is that insulting?
That's life isn't fair sometimes.
Why is it not insulting?
And if you're a man, you compete with men.
Hang on, Dominique. If life isn't fair, then why can't the women compete against the trans women? You've just said that you want everything to be fair and equal. So how come it's okay?
It's about
to be
similar
unfair.
physical capability. Do you accept that men have physical advantages over women?
You're saying 2 different
things. Do you accept yes or no?
Trans women is completely a lot
No,
more
it's not.
complicated.
Biological men that have surpassed puberty, that decide they're women, do they have a physical advantage over women as biological men? Yes or no?
It's not
that doesn't disappear.
But then that's an unfair advantage.
It is, because that's the point of sport.
Dominique,
it's biology, though. I don't understand your argument.
If there is a conversation where a trans person gets called a man in a wig in 2022, then we are.
I didn't say that. I said you'd say you're a woman and put on a wig. Does that suddenly take your physical advantage away? No, we're talking about biology.
You're okay with that unfair?
How is that unfair? It's reality.
Look, it boils down to this.
Final word, Shaun.
Amy, you do not follow sport. You've never played sport. It's not the centre of your life like it is for many women. That's why you wouldn't be saying what you're saying. I am a very average bloke at
How
this
many
point.
trans women were in the World Cup, the Women's World Cup?
In a race, just because I've grown longer legs, because I've had testosterone. In my sister, it's ridiculous. It's unfair to women. It'll destroy women's sport, and it will stop many young women even bothering with sport, and I think that's wrong.
1% of people are going to have that much power.
The number is increasing. We're seeing it in America, where you did say that it was only high school level for Leah Thomas. In America, sport in schools is extremely important. That's why a lot of the colleges get funded.
There's next to no trans people.
Do you know what I'm just going to say? Bravo, Nadine Dorries, because this conversation had to happen.
Massively undervalued.
Amy Nickell, Shaun Bailey, Dominique Samuals, thank you so much. My superstar panel are here all night.